Retail marijuana sales in Colorado are set to begin bright and early on New Year's Day. Yesterday in Denver, retailers were lined up as doors opened in the city's licensing bureau, ensuring that they'd be good to go on January 1st. Only businesses that were already licensed to sell medical marijuana are allowed to make the transition to recreational sales. But store owner Jason Jones hopes that more will be able to follow.
I think that you'll see a lot of new retail stores that'll be coming in all throughout January and probably February also. So we're very excited. It looks like we've got our licenses right here. So there it is.
But not everyone is cheering. Former Congressman Patrick Kennedy recently started a group called Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Congressman, Project SAM has said that a massive public health and safety problem is to come in a state like Colorado as a result of legalizing recreational marijuana sales. But, you know, pot's actually been legal for about a year now. What kind of tipping point do you see coming?
Well, Craig, first of all, my condolences on the loss of your grandmother. It was a great story you told about her.
Thank you, Congressman.
On the issue that you just asked about, obviously, you know that with legality, just as is in the case with alcohol and with tobacco, there's going to be more use. There's just really no dispute about that. And at the top of your segment, you showed that this person was talking about the increased number of retail outlets. Well, what that means is that there's going to be more exposure to kids. Well, we know that kids, when they perceive something as not harmful, are more likely to try it, use it, and the like. And what the studies have already been released that have shown early indications of this, and that is that there's greater use amongst teenagers, 12th graders particularly, and that use correlates with the both medical marijuana coming into states, and now, of course, with legalization, it's only to be expected that we're going to see that increased use continue to go up. Now, people might think that's not a big deal because they don't think marijuana is a big deal, but the science now tells us otherwise, and I think that's going to be our challenge, is getting that information out, because now we have a new big tobacco. And what I mean by that is you have a commercial interest by these proprietors that you just saw in your film who now want to sell. And they have a for-profit motive to sell as much marijuana as they can.
Congressman,
what that means is they're going to have a commercial reason to try to get kids to use, just like big tobacco did in its heyday.
Congressman, you mentioned some research, and I think you're referring to one of the NIH studies, and it showed that marijuana use among young people is on the rise. As you just said, 60% of high school seniors say they do not think that marijuana is harmful, hurtful. 23% admitted that they smoked it in the last month, and again, that's just admitted. If attitudes and laws surrounding pot are becoming more lax, what do you think is the most effective way to combat those?
Well, I was the author of the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, which treats addiction like every other disease. But the best treatment is prevention. So we really have to address these cultural norms. And these cultural norms are driven by this move towards legalization. When something is legal, the perceived harm of it, as you indicated in your citation there, is reduced. And that means more people will use. So the two most abused drugs are alcohol and tobacco, and it's there because they're legal.
Yeah.
I just think as a nation, we want to watch what happens in Colorado and Washington and make sure that we don't repeat the effects if they are as negative as we think they may be. We don't want to have that repeated in other states around the country.
You of course, once served in Congress. You know a thing or two about the will of the people. Colorado's residents have voted to legalize pot. They voted to tax pot. This is highly supported statewide. It's also highly supported in Washington State. How do you reconcile your views with the fact that, honestly, the people have spoken?
Well, they have spoken, and obviously what we need to do now is monitor what the maybe unintended consequences are. Because I think, Craig, a lot of people voted for this, as I initially thought, and they thought no big deal. What we need to know now is what are the facts on the ground? Are there greater hospitalizations amongst kids? Are there greater fatalities on the roads from drugged driving? Is there an impact on learning and education? Is there an increase in dropout rate? These are the things, Craig, we need to now monitor so we know what the consequences, because I don't think the people of Colorado and Washington ultimately could have foreseen what those consequences are. But now the rest of the nation gets to watch as they go through this experiment. And that is, I think, something all of us need to pay close attention to if we don't want those consequences to visit themselves on the rest of us in other states.
Congressman, really quickly here, 30 seconds. Would we be better off resigning ourselves to the fact that this is something that is clearly going to start happening state by state over the next 5, 10, 15 years? Would we be better off by figuring out ways to restrict it, ways to monitor it, as you just indicated, versus trying to stop this tide?
Well, I think we have to do everything we can, Craig, and that's why we need to pay more attention to what the consequences are, and we'll have to monitor them, as you said. But I appreciate you having me on. This is a debate that, frankly, never took place in a real vigorous way before Colorado approved or Washington approved. I don't think the country really does understand what it's in for if this continues to go down the road it's going in right now. And I think it's time for us to pause and just start thinking about this some more, because marijuana may not be as bad as heroin or cocaine or others, but when you see more people use it, the adverse consequences of it are real, and I think we need to pay attention to that before we continue to go down this road.
Former Congressman Patrick Kennedy. Congressman, thank you. Always appreciate you.
Thank you, Craig.
All right, we're going to